And you know how you can start Chrome with maximizing it and disabling the notifications. And we also saw how you can simply write driver.find element commands by the ID or something and extract the elements. Then just a minute. Yeah. So over here, let us see the situation where suppose you are finding the element by the ID or by the name, and what happens is that the element is not having ID or a name. Fine. Most of the times you will not find every element on the page which has an ID or a name. So in that case, we end up using Xpaths or the CSS selectors. I hope my voice is clear to everyone,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So in those cases, we use XPaths or CSS selectors. Fine. Let me just make a new file.
Ashish, your screen is not visible. Can you share it once again?
I've shared it. Hold on, I'm sharing it again. All right, fine. So I'll just make a new Java project rather. Okay, and I'll call it as day 5. All right, in this I'll explain you about XPaths today. Fine. I'll make a new file named as xpaths.txt over here. Right. Now, what are XPaths? XPath is something like you can say it represents the location of the element. Okay, it is something like the address of the element. Right. So out here, there are two types of XPaths. One is known as absolute XPath. Other is known as the complete XPath. Fine. Now, what is absolute XPath and what is uh, absolute? Sorry, I'm sorry, absolute or complete XPath. The other one is partial XPath. I'm sorry. Okay, this is known as partial XPath. Now, how does partial XPath it work? Fine. Suppose I have this web page. Okay, or let us go to some other site, say uh, zoho.com. Okay, so out here we have the Zoho image, suppose, or this text 25 years of Zoho. If you inspect this particular text, it's a link. Fine. Now this link is not having any say ID or something. So if you have to calculate the XPath, how will you do it? Right. Let me switch over to the doc view. Right. Now look, the thing is, in case of complete XPath or absolute XPath, we start from the root of the document. The root of the document is the HTML tag. Fine. So we will write, if you hit Control F, you will see a small text box at the bottom, Control F. Your focus should be inside this inspector and hit Control F. In this, you type HTML. So the first tag, HTML tag is the first tag, which will be which is there at the root of the document. Inside it, there is head tag and body tag. Okay, so if I write slash body, that means inside the HTML tag, there is a body tag. Fine. Inside the body tag, you have this div tag. Okay, there are two division tags inside the body tag. Rather, one, two, three division tags. You want to go inside the first division tag because the link is somewhere inside the first division tag. So you will write like this, div 1, because there are three divisions which are parallel to each other. If I put div 2, it will go to the second division. Div 3 to the third division. Fine. So you write div 1. So it will go to the first division. Under the first division, there is a para tag and then there is an anchor tag. Okay. So you will write slash p. So it will go to the para tag slash a anchor tag. So this becomes the complete XPath, the absolute XPath of this particular element. Okay, so I'll just copy this and paste it over here. You don't have to calculate this every time like this. Okay, for example, I go to the link sign in. This is the sign in link. If I want to copy the complete XPath, you can go over here, copy full XPath. So when you select this option, copy full XPath in Chrome, you get the XPath like this. So this is your complete XPath or absolute XPath, but practically we refrain ourselves from using these XPaths, complete or absolute XPath. Although these XPaths are very accurate, okay, but we don't prefer to use them because if something changes in the website, okay, in the application, if suppose a particular element is added in between, then not just this XPath, all the XPaths of the application will go for a toss. Okay, not just this XPath, but all the XPaths of the application will just dry out. Okay, and you'll have to replace all of them. So that is why we use the partial XPaths. Partial XPath is something, you know, it starts with the double slash. Starts with a double slash star. This means all the elements on the web page. Okay, if you go here, hit Control F and type double slash star, it will represent all the tags, all the elements on the web page. Okay, but generally we obviously we don't want all the elements on the web page. We obviously want specific elements on the web page. So suppose this is the customer's link over here. Okay, and it's got the tag anchor tag A. So if I just write over here double slash A, so this will represent all the links on the web page. because all the links have the anchor tag A. Okay, if I write /input, then this is going to represent all the input tags on the web page. Okay, but generally we don't find all the tags, we want specific tags. All right, so hold on. For example, I'm on the sign in page. This is the username page field. Okay, if I just copy the XPath, not the full XPath, but the normal XPath, this is the uh, partial XPath actually. Okay, so if I copy the XPath and if I go here, the XPath which I get is something like this. Okay, replace double quotes with single quotes, double slash star. That means basically all the elements on the web page. Okay, double slash star, which means all the elements on the web page. And basically it is saying that out of all the elements on the web page, get me the element whose ID is equal to login ID. Okay, get me the element from the web page whose ID is equal to login ID. And what you can do is to be more specific. Instead of star, you can include the tag name input. Fine. So you can write over here double slash input. That means out of all the input tags on the page, get me the input tag whose ID is login ID. So this is your partial XPath. Okay. If you go to, hold on. If you look at suppose this particular image, Zoho image over here, right? If you right click on it, or instead of this image, this text to access Zoho page, Zoho home. Okay, this text is inside this division, right? So if you copy the XPath for this, so this will give you the XPath something like this. So what it does basically, okay, this division is holding the text. Now this division has got no ID. So it jumps to one division above. One division above is this division. So this division is also not having any ID. And then it jumps to one more tag above. This is the form tag. This form tag has the ID login. So it starts building the XPath from here like this. That is, there is a form whose ID is login. Inside it, there is go to the first division tag, and inside it go to the first division tag. So you'll highlight the text. So if an element is not having an ID and you get the XPath for that element, so it will try to build the XPath from the nearest possible element which has an ID and will start the XPath from there. Okay. If suppose there is no element who has an ID, for example, if you look at this image, Zoho image, right? This is the Zoho image. Okay, this is the division. If you copy the XPath, you get an XPath like this. So we were lucky over here that this division is inside another division whose ID is sign in flow. So it simply builds the XPath from this element. Right. Now, sometimes you don't get the hello. Somebody was asking some question. I'm not able to hear you. Okay. So if you go to this side and go to the money section. Right. Say, for example, this is the image on the top, Rediff money Wiz. Okay. If I copy the XPath over here and if I paste the XPath, you get again the XPath like this. So there is an element whose ID is wrapper from which everything it starts. If you don't have such element over here, we had this span which had no ID. So the XPath started building from this division which had an ID. If you don't find an element or if you don't find anything like nearest possible element which has an ID, then you will get the complete XPath. In that case, you will get the complete XPath. Okay, right. So in case there had been no element enclosing this element which has an ID, so in that case, it will start from the root of the document automatically and give you the complete XPath. Okay, right. Now, moving ahead, I'll add the jar files. The jars over here under lib. Okay, and I'll just create a new file known as the xpaths.java. And you know, I'll paste this. Okay, now the thing is, if you go to any site, okay, say if I am on Zoho login page only, okay, that is we go to this URL. I can give the command driver dot find element by the XPath. You can give the partial or the complete XPath, any XPath over here. So if I just go and look at the username field, okay, we just build the XPath and this was the one. You can use any one of them. Okay. So if I write over here driver dot find element by this XPath dot send keys and you give the username, okay, any username. So this will work. Okay, you just have to give the command driver.find element by the XPath. Now instead of by the ID or by the name, we are using by the XPath. You see that? Right. Now, what if, either you are finding it by ID or you are finding it by name or XPath? What if you give a wrong locator which is not boiling down to the element? Okay. Suppose if I give an ID which is not existing. Okay. I gave this ID which is actually not existing. So if I run this code, you see that it goes on this website and it will throw you an exception. No such element exception. Now, what is an exception? An exception is something, you can equate it to some failure or something. Okay. So out here, if you look at this now, sometimes what happens is that element, you know, takes, I'll talk in detail about exceptions and sometimes it happens that the element takes a little longer to appear on the web page. Okay. Right. So suppose this element is not there. So what Selenium will do, it will in a fraction of a second, it will throw the exception that no such element found exception. But but you want it to wait. Okay, wait till the element is present or something. You want to put some delay because at times the elements they load later on. So one solution is that people do is that they put a sleep, thread.sleep of say 5 seconds. So thread.sleep is good, but it is like pausing the program for 5 seconds, mandatorily pausing the program. Okay, so when you run this code, okay, so it will wait for 5 seconds. Right, it's going to wait for 5 seconds, and after 5 seconds, it will throw this exception. See, it has come up. Fine, but this is not a good solution. Man, what if the link appears in the first second or second you want to use it? So you cannot just write thread.sleep everywhere to wait for the elements in your program. Using it once or twice is good, but you cannot use it every time. So that is why we have the concept of implicit wait. Fine. In Selenium, after you launch the browser, so once the driver is initialized, you should always write this line driver dot manage dot timeouts dot implicitly wait duration of seconds, say 10 seconds. So this is first of all, it's known as implicit wait. Okay, it's a global wait. Global weight means that it is applicable to all the driver.findElement commands. Okay, implicit weight is a global weight. It is applicable to all the driver.findElement commands, and this weight is dynamic. What is dynamic? If you are writing driver.findElement by ID or by XPath, if element is not found, then it will keep on checking the element for 10 seconds. However, if the element is found, it will use it in the fourth second. Say if the element is found in the fourth second, then it will use that element and it's going to move forward. It is not like mandatorily pausing the program. Okay, implicit wait will actually be something like a global wait. Fine. Okay. Now, uh, oh, guys, just a minute. I need to put the charger. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. Right. So now, this is something like a global wait. Okay, it's applicable to all driver.findElement commands and it is also dynamic. It will not mandatorily pause your program. All right. So now if you run this, so this will throw the exception after waiting for 10 seconds. However, if the element is found within 10 seconds, it's going to move forward. You see that? And after 10 seconds, you get the exception. Right. So this is a very important concept and you just have to write this line once immediately after opening the browser. Okay, and it is applicable to whichever driver.findElement command I'm giving. Okay, in the program, it is applicable to all of them. If you have studied UFT, it is somewhat similar to the synchronization global wait timeout in UFT. Okay, now moving ahead, talking about exceptions. I saw over here that no such element exception. Now, what is an exception? Exception is obviously a state in which you don't want to be. It represents practically some error in the running program. Okay, so let me just talk about exception handling first. Okay, I'll create a new class known as exception handling. Suppose a very simple thing. If I'm writing system.out.println a and I write int x equals to 100 divided by 2. So I'm going back to Java now, talking about exceptions and b. So when you run this program, you will see it will print a and b. However, if I write 100 divided by 0, and if you run this program, see it prints a but does not print b, and it throws an exception, arithmetic exception divided by 0. And it also tells you that it comes in exception handling.java line number 8. So it gives you the line number as well. Okay, fine. Now the thing is, the problem is if you get an exception, the program just abruptly stops over there. Okay, now when you're working with Selenium, you're writing a Selenium script, and if there is an exception, then you don't want your script to abruptly stop. You want that fine, maybe you should report an error or something and then stop. Or maybe the exception is not a very critical exception. You just want to report the error and move forward. Okay, so most of you must have seen this thing. There is something known as a try and catch block. You write the line of code inside the try block and the catch block. If there is some exception, if there is some error on this line, then what happens is that the control comes in the catch block only if there is error in try block or there is exception in try block. But talking in layman terms, that if there is something which goes wrong over here, the control will come in the exception block. You can just print over here exception catch block. So when you run this, it prints exception catch block. So it the control goes over here, prints this. On this line, the exception comes. So the control goes inside the catch block. So you know that something has gone wrong over here and you can report it out here. However, if there is no exception, if I write 100 divided by 2, so it will just keep on running the program. Fine. Now suppose over here I print x1 and x2. Now inside my try block, I have got three lines. Okay, first one is printing x1, second one is x 100 divided by 2, then x2. So if I just run this, now there will be no exception. So it prints a, x1, x2, and b. However, if there is an exception, if exception comes on this line, when you run this code, it will print a, x1, and then it goes over here and then b. So if there is some exception, says the exception in the is on this line, then the code lines which are followed by this line, they don't execute. Okay, right. So if there is any exception on this line, then x2 is not printed. This will not execute. And if you just want to see what kind of exception it is, Okay, when exception comes up, the object of exception class is generated inside the memory. And if you want to see what kind of exception it is, you can print e dot get message. So the exception class object which is generated in the memory, it generates the message when you run this. So it says that divided by zero exception. Okay, right. And if you write dot print stack trace. So stack trace is what is stack trace? When you run this, this is the stack trace where it tells you that this is exception is coming on the line number 10. Okay, like for example, if I open the xpaths.java and run this where this element was not being found, just hold on. So out here, it goes and it says no such element exception. You see this? This is the exception trace. This is the exception trace. It names all the files through which the exception went. It started from xpaths.java line number 44. So when an exception comes up, one of the files is your files, the other ones are the internal ones. Okay, so if you click on this link, the line number is highlighted that something went wrong in this line and you got no such element exception. So you can also do one thing that once the browser opens, you can write all the lines in a try catch block like this. So if something goes wrong, the control will come inside this. Okay, you can report a failure that something went wrong, which was unexpected in the script. Okay, now how do you report the failure? We will talk about those things later on, but just I'm telling you the concept of try catch over here. The lines which you write inside the try block, if any one of the line fails, the control goes inside the catch block. Okay, so this is really very important concept. All right, you can also debug this and you will see the execution happening in real time. All right, I had told you how to debug your programs. You put a breakpoint, say if I put a breakpoint on line number 7, on day 1 I had told you how you can debug the programs. Debugging is running the program line by line. So on this line I put a breakpoint and I click on the debug button over here. So what will happen is that the control will stop on this particular line. So once the control stops on this line, you can hit F6 of the keyboard. It will execute the line. See, it prints A, then you hit F6 again. It will print X1. But now if you hit F6, the control will come inside the catch block. Okay. And you print the stack trace and you print B. Right. So if you hit F8, it will run normally. Okay. Right. Now, this is good. Fine. Now the next thing is, you should go and learn more about XPaths. Okay, you should always put this in try catch block as a beginner so that you are seeing that what is happening, or even if you don't put, you'll get the exception trace over there. Okay, now talking about XPaths, the next step would be that we would like to build our own custom XPaths. This is important, and that's the next thing. But I will take that up tomorrow. Okay, I have to end wrap the class a little early today. Okay, I have to go somewhere, fine, urgently. Right. But the complete custom XPaths, I'll start off tomorrow and I'll also give you a few exercises to do. Okay. So I have the exercises, interfaces and WebDriver. Just do this exercise. Fine. It's on interfaces and basics of WebDriver. So tomorrow I'll give you for constructors as well. Fine. So hold on. We are going to have a discussion session of these exercises as well. These exercises are not to evaluate you, okay, but these exercises are to make sure that you get a confidence. Most of the questions in these exercises are like, what will be the output of the program or something. So you can also write that program in Eclipse and test it out. Okay, I am literally not evaluating anyone based on these exercises.